Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Multifamily Mind podcast. Today, I sit down with CEO of Funnel Leasing and fellow podcaster Tyler Christiansen. He shares how Funnel is changing the way we think about centralization from a leasing perspective to a renter's perspective, from discussions on role specialization to AI integration to strategic partnering. You're going to want to stick around and hear all of Tyler's wisdom. Let's jump in. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Multifamily Mind. I'm your host, Steve Wunch, and we are excited today to have the CEO of Funnel Leasing, Tyler Christiansen, join us. Hey, Tyler, how you doing, man?
Good, Steve. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, good to see you too. I was really excited to have you on because, we've had several conversations with other folks in the multifamily universe this year and towards the end of season one. Stephanie Verson might be somebody that you're familiar with.
Yeah, she's great.
She and I started conversations around centralization, role specialization. And I know you guys you were sort of predicting the future before this really became like the standard operating procedure for most big operators. You were looking at centralization early on and really focused on this customer-centric model. Wonder if you can give a short sort of origin story about how Funnel started and why you guys felt like you had a solution in that space that nobody else was offering.
Yeah, well, Steve, I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. And we are certainly a result of our fabulous partners like Stephanie, and she was at Veritas, organizations like Essex and Camden and Cortland, who, there's that Atlanta, famous Chick-fil-A ad where they say, we didn't invent the chicken, just the chicken sandwich. And Funnel did not invent centralization. Centralization existed before Funnel, and lots of operators were doing it in different ways. What Funnel was fortunate to be was the original centralization software, in that in order to centralize, what we're really talking about at its core is that, forever, multifamily operations really began and ended at a single property. And so whether that was scheduling the tour or managing renewals, anything that engaged with the renter, it had to be done by an individual team. Much like for those, obviously your listeners are familiar with multifamily, but if you take a big step back, it's similar to the automobile industry in that historically you bought and serviced your vehicle at a car dealership. Right. And the big disruption that's happening in cars these days is not just EVs. It's the fact that you actually can buy and service your vehicle with a brand, right? Like I buy a Tesla through the Tesla or the Rivian through the Rivian brand. And similarly, centralization changed the relationship between the consumer, the renter, and the management company to say it doesn't have to happen siloed in an individual community. And so you're right. We were early on with our partners, way back in 2018 is when I first joined what was previously known as Nestio. In 2019, we launched Funnel and started our first CRM customers. And from that day till today, we've continued to advance what it means to be a centralized operator. And so lots of learnings along the way, but you're right. It felt good to get that one right.
Yeah. Is it primarily front office kind of technology, or do you do the whole accounting suite as well?
No, you're right. Probably easiest to describe what Funnel doesn't do at this point. So we don't do accounting software. We are not a facilities management system. So you're not going to see us tracking, where is that missing AC unit per se, but anything that the renter or the site associate needs can live in Funnel. And so we do everything from tour management, application, lease signing, move-in, resident payment, kind of the entire customer lifecycle. And then we integrate with best-in-class third-party systems for the accounting software, the hardware, and the maintenance.
Okay, very cool. So this whole idea on this renter-centric experience, what's it like for a prospect to go through the sales cycle in the funnel?
I appreciate that. So first and foremost, the majority of renters do typically go down a single property journey. And of course, in that use case, we want it to be as seamless as possible. And so like I mentioned, we do everything from the tour through the lease signing, and we want it to be self-service. So we as consumers know that I do want human interactions. And when I want those human interactions, I want them to be valuable. I want to be known. But there's a lot of times also I want to be left alone, right? That I want to be able to schedule my tour at a time that's convenient for me. And then I'll say, hey, you know what? I need help. I want I want a human guided tour. I want a question answered. And so Funnel can facilitate that interaction between when does the consumer want to be left alone and they're going to go on their own. And that's not just go on their own in terms of the tour. That's literally complete the application on their own. The majority of funnel applications are done in less than 10 minutes on a mobile device. But then there's a lot of folks that want to raise their hand. And when do you route them to AI? When do you route them to the human? Is the human on-site or is the human, off-site at a centralized location? So Funnel facilitates that entire customer journey. Where it gets really unique, not only are we trying to provide a seamless experience, but we really manage that unique intersection of the off-site team or a renter who wants to engage at multiple communities, right? I want to tour multiple communities. So some of our partners, I think Veritas was unique in their density in San Francisco, but many of our other partners, the MAAs of the world, they have enough geographic density that something like 10 to 20% of their leases actually started by touring at another community. And so you use the phrase renter-centric, and we proudly here at our office in Tampa display the trademark for renter-centric that we own. And that really means that the renter can go where they want to go, regardless of what property they started at. So creates a lot of cool opportunities, but we think it's more similar to what consumers prefer, which is, I'm traveling this week and I'm going to stay at a Marriott marquee property. I may come visit you in Atlanta and I want to stay at a Courtyard, right? And so that singular experience with different brands is something that Funnel can facilitate. Regardless of where I am in the country, Camden will know me as a renter.
Have you seen any impact in terms of how that's improved, like conversion ratios for your partners or, lead to lease conversion ratios improving?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also an area, not only can you really optimize for the conversion ratios, you can also optimize for reducing your marketing spend. Because if I know that 20% of my leads are likely to book a tour at another community, well, perhaps I can be more efficient with my marketing spend, right? And tailor the marketing to most folks when they move to a new neighborhood, for instance, here in Tampa, if I'm moving to Hyde Park, I'm not starting my search saying, well, I want to look at just MAA Hyde Park communities. But MAA with Funnel knows that these three communities are really sister communities. Let's allow that consumer to book a tour at all three, right? So there's those conversion metrics. There's also kind of the marketing spend. And then a really cool one that we're still early on in terms of influencing is that some of our larger partners that have this type of geographic density, a newer one would be UDR or Morgan Properties. They're rolling Funnel out. GID is another new one. On average, they're seeing about 5%. And this is a unique stat that people don't talk about in multifamily. In technology, we talk about this idea of the lifetime value of the customer, right? Or LTV. Yep. Well, in multifamily, we just talk about the lease, right? How long is their lease? What's their lease rate? And then we think about renewal rates. But we don't really think about, well, what if Steve wanted to move from Atlanta to DC? Is he still going to stay in my properties and my family of brands? And Funnel allows consumers to think about that. So much so that, again, a lot of our partners are averaging anywhere between 4 to 7% of residents are alumni residents, where I started at community A, I moved to community B. And when you start to see, as you know, Steve, the industry is getting a little bit more consolidated, right? We're seeing some mega managers now. There's a lot of cool things that start to emerge of, well, could I, instead of, when I get that notice to vacate, allowing them to just walk out the door, could I begin marketing to them on other available sister communities? So we're, again, still early innings, but some of those metrics I think will genuinely change consumer behavior over time.
Yeah, that's really cool. I back in the day, I worked for a owner operator called Archstone Communities.
That explains a lot. That explains a lot. Archstone is one of you find these remarkable people like yourself, and there's this through line of Archstone. Archstone DNA is impressive.
Yes. And, even back in the 90s, they were, you could transfer to any Archstone property. They made it as easy as possible. Of course, we didn't have technology backing us up and helping to make that process easier for the customer. So I love that you guys have that. And I'm sure your partners really appreciate that too. Do you necessarily have to be a bigger shop like UDR or MAA or Windsor or some of the other partners that you've had, or do you guys also work with some smaller mom and pop or stuff? Because some of the tech providers, don't really want to operate with smaller folks. So tell me a little bit about what that's like for Funnel.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Steve. So I think we were fortunate to start with some of these larger operators where we could see the solutions at scale. So, it's hard to have these data points on a smaller data set. So yes, we started on enterprise, but some of my favorite partners and the most successful partners are ones that are 2,000 units, 5,000 units. We just had our customer user event in California. We call it the Forum. And, two examples that by, my point of view would be relatively large, but compared to an MAA are pretty small. One is Monument out of Miami, South Florida. Wonderful operators. Ginny Decker is their head of operations. They have had phenomenal results on funnel using our automation and our centralization. They don't have a ton of geographic density. They've got some properties in the Midwest, some properties in South Florida, but they've still taken advantage of that. Another would be Kane Residential out of North Carolina. They've got some Class A assets, and they were one of our first kind of third-party managers, not a big owner REIT, to really see some huge results in ROI. Because at the end of the day, the concept of automation and time savings and role specialization, as you referenced with Stephanie, it doesn't have to be about cross-selling. You mentioned kind of front of house, back of house. A lot of our partners are just moving towards centralized admin, right? Sure. Why are we performing renewals on site? Let's let our people on site be better at their job by focusing on the customer in front of them. And so some of the principles don't apply broadly, right? If I'm not a big REIT with a ton of density, maybe I don't want to cross-sell. Maybe my third-party manager, my clients don't want me to cross-sell.
Right.
But certainly the desire to have a more efficient, more focused, more customer-serving team on site, that's something that really applies to everybody.
So when a partner approaches you guys as a potential solution, do you offer some help in terms of, like if I was an owner operator, I wouldn't know whether to scratch my watch or wind my butt when it comes to how to set up a centralized organization. Do you kind of help in that regard, sort of as a consultant as well, to say, hey, these are some things that we recommend you look at centralizing, and these are the reasons why? How does that work with your process and your partners?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Stephen. I think you and I both as suppliers to the industry, we prefer the term partner, right? And there's nothing more complimentary than when you're truly treated as a partner. And I love when we get invited in by our partners and they say, hey, help us walk through this experience. So I'm stopping over on my flight tomorrow in Las Vegas because we have a new partner there who literally last week called us and said, hey, Funnel, we love the tech. We need your help on centralization. We've got great density in the submarket, but we don't really know, we don't want to use your tool and feel like we aren't getting the value. Walk us through what that looks like, right? How should we think about compensation models? How should we think about lead sharing and admin and all that stuff? So yeah, we have a service that we call Centralization as a Service, or CAS for short, where we'll actually take a lot of the learnings. And one of the really cool things for us is that some of those early partners that I've referenced, they're publicly traded REITs. And what's important about that, and again, you understand this from your days back at Archstone, private companies often have their secret sauce and they don't really want to share that with the world. The public companies have to put out their earnings and something they call FFO, funds from operations. And so they get asked every single quarter, how did you do this, right? And that's where we get to be very proud and say UDR in their last earnings call said, hey, we think this new funnel tool that we're using is going to result in these operational savings. That also allows us to really be public with, Essex has told the whole world about their collections concept. So a smaller operator knows about that, but they really want to know, well, how would I configure the software if I want to do collections, right? And not collections like, making the rent pay on time, but grouping my assets into a different model than individual properties. So we love consulting with our partners on the journey from property-centric operations to renter-centric operations.
That's great. And I'm glad our audience gets to hear that because, we probably have some senior level leadership listening to the podcast who probably have some interest in what you guys are doing. I mean, you're shaking it up. You're definitely, making an impact. And it's not just because you guys wear really cool pink jackets and shoes, but you're doing some really cool stuff. One of the things that I've heard some recent conversations regarding is the idea of not only centralization and role specialization, but also offshoring. Are you guys using an offshore model for any of your support for the customers that are partners of yours?
Yeah, great question. And Steve, something that I know, your team and ours align on is while we're all for technology in the future, the intersection of the human teams with the renter is where the value happens. It's where the magic happens. I think I think Dom Beveridge posted this recently, but in a increasingly AI driven world, human interactions are just getting more valuable. Now, what we don't have is we don't prescribe a single operating system for our partners. And part of that is we decided very early on, although we provide software for call centers, that we weren't going to staff those call centers. And that was because we didn't want to put ourselves in the middle of the operating model, right? We're a tool that allows our partners to decide how they want to staff. So as it relates to offshoring, we have several partners, perhaps most notably RMR out of Atlanta, Avanti out of Denver, that an element of their customer service journey is an offshore team, right? And we see that with smaller operators. We see it with large operators like Greystar, Camden. They have teams in India. It really depends on what you're trying to do. Where candidly, I think you see the most value again is when the consumer wants to engage with you, you have to make a decision of, do I want that to be at the attentive, well-dressed, on-site leasing associate? And a couple of weeks ago, got to walk into a Cortland community. Cortland has centralized a lot of the administrative work, but I walked into this property in Phoenix and they're greeting me, at the door, smiling in a suit, was this wonderful leasing associate, blanking on her name now, but she was just ready to go show me a tour, right? Other partners recognize that, hey, we want to go for perhaps a more cost-efficient model, but also a more readily available model where they will take a team, for instance, in Central America and say, hey, they're not going to be distracted by the on-site tours or the on-site vendor. They're going to be available to answer that chat 24/7, right? Yeah. And so it really becomes a team effort of, like you said, specialization, that routing the consumer to where they can get their question answered, their need addressed the most efficiently. Funnel does allow offshoring to be a part of that equation, but we have just as many partners who have sworn off offshoring as those who say, all right, we need to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a new concept for our industry specifically, I think. How did you guys bridge so multifamily operators, traditionally speaking, I hate to say blanket statements, but we've been fairly risk averse. Like I'm going to let everybody else play with Funnel before I choose to play with Funnel. How did you, cause you guys have really, when you said 2019 to where you are now, I'm like blown away because you've made significant progress in your platform. We'll talk a little bit about Phoenix in a few minutes, but how do you guys get your operators or your operating partners to see the value in taking that risk? And can you make any recommendations? Because there may be some supplier partners listening to this that are, looking for ways to better ramp up their efforts to get new partnerships with folks. So I'd love to just get a little insight from you in that regard.
Yeah. Well, Steve, you worked at some great organizations. And I remember you worked at a competitor and we were always looking up at you because you guys had I remember you guys, when you were there, announced 2 million units, right? And that seemed like a distant dream that we would never achieve at Funnel. And I will say what we sell at Funnel is a solution to implement. To really get all the value, you do want to shake things up, right? And so you're right. It is a trade-off that this is not a simple, easy button solution of, I want this new thing, flip a switch and it's on. Yep. To really get the improved customer experience or the cost savings or, the kind of career growth that role specialization can give, you do need to change your operating model. And because of that, it is a narrower entry point than some other solutions. And so we knew that going into it. And so we're still not at 2 million units like Knock was. Great product. It's still a great product. But we're north of 1 million units and growing rapidly. And I think the key to it, to answer your question, is you have to be very aware of the technology bell curve. And there's great books written about this called Crossing the Chasm, where early on, you are not for everybody. And we're going to talk about Phoenix in a minute. Phoenix is a newer product for us. It's a newer solution. It's not for everybody. We don't need it to be for everyone. There's at least 20 million professionally managed apartment units in this country. Not all of them need to use our solution, right? Right. But you've got to be very intentional early on about who are you, what's the job to be done, what does your ideal customer look like? And when you just make them phenomenally successful, right? That they will go to bat for you. As you know, they're begging to invest in the product, right? They're telling their friends they have to look at you. That creates that snowball momentum where eventually you cross the proverbial chasm. And this is, for funnel, I feel like it happened not that long ago, where when a client says, hey, I need a reference, Steve, you've been there where you're like, oh crap, I don't know who to call. Right. But then you get to a place where you're like, oh, I've got dozens of numbers. Are you looking for a reference on this PM software or in this location? And it's just one by one. This is not an industry where you can just magically convince everybody, but it is an industry, as you know, where relationships matter, right? So you're an Archstone guy. I know 10 other Archstone guys. And now, if I say, Steve uses this product, right? And they're like, oh, that means a lot to me, right? And so, we've slowly built that referenceable network. And that wasn't true that long ago, right? You had to put your neck on the line if you're going to pick a tool like Funnel. Yeah. But now we've got enough proven success of other partners that you got that flywheel turning. Doesn't mean it's easy, but certainly we've kind of proven our worth in the industry.
Any recommendations to listeners who might be considering, looking at their tech stack and making some changes or getting ready to, make a shift in software, and what recommendations you'd make for them to kind of vet through? Because there's big players, there's the tried and trues that have been around for forever. But then there's, a lot of newer, there seems to be a lot more in your playground than there used to be. So just some best practices around how to vet a good tech partner.
Yeah, great question. And I think that you're right. I've now been in the industry long enough myself. I was at a PM software before this. I was also at LRO back in the day. So I've seen different stages of company. Yeah, I've seen different stages of companies, seen different cycles in our industry. And we're in a unique place right now where there's acute pain in multifamily, right? Because all the supply that came on the market and rents aren't growing like they were a few years ago. But at the same time, there's more solutions than ever, like you said, right? There was all this money that came in to invest in technology companies. And we know we're clearly in a big cycle of excitement and hype and promise for AI and automation. And so it is hard. Like I feel for our operators that they're going to apartmentalize and they're just going to get overwhelmed with the amount of, information that's thrown at them.
And it's crazy how much prop tech is there now. I mean, I even think back to op tech, like even 4 or 5 years ago compared to what it is now. It's just crazy.
It is crazy. And so I think that I have a lot of empathy for our partners that, they're getting pressured from their clients and their bosses saying, well, what are we doing with AI? What are we doing with centralization? And they need to check those boxes. And I think to answer your question, and now in my seat, I get to buy a lot of software as well. I think the question that I always think about is what business outcome am I trying to achieve that I cannot achieve today with my current technology? Now that obviously gives the advantage first and foremost to the incumbent solution, which is why, like you mentioned, these tried and true solutions are there, but that's okay. I mean, so at Funnel, we're an innovative company, but we use Salesforce, a 20-year-old piece of software for our CRM. And when somebody comes to me and says, oh, we need a new support software, or we need a new marketing software, I'm going to say, well, can Salesforce do it? Right? Because consolidation is valuable. But what you often find is there will be many instances in where you need to break the tech stack. Hey, this PM software, I just can't do this thing with it, right? So for Funnel, that often is centralization or automation, right? Or the customer experience. And what I find is that when we have, PMCs come to us and they don't know what they can't do, they're just trying to try stuff. It's a waste of time for both of us, right? Yeah. Because I'm not going to convince you that my AI or my CRM is better than what you have if you don't know what you can't do. And frankly, you shouldn't use us if you're happy with what you have. But once our partners have gone through that kind of self-reflection of, I'd really like to be able to have offsite renewals, but I tried to do it in my PM software and I can't. I just can't. Because then that defines success. It justifies the pain of changing software. And it really gives me proper context on why move, right? So I think that's what I would recommend is there. And it often will be that you're going to look at, we think of the Goldilocks, you've got kind of these one size fits all that aren't super specialized. Funnel's kind of in the middle where we do quite a bit, but we're very comfortable. There's a lot of times where someone will come to us and we say, you know what, we're probably a little too broad for you. You probably should look at something that's very good at this one thing, right? And maybe that is inside a Funnel, but you don't need all the other stuff we have, right? So go find that exact solution for your needs. It's going to be easier to implement. And so I think there's tools like yours where it's, hey, the value proposition is incredibly clear and it's going to make a lot of people happy really quickly. a tool like Funnel, like you said, it's going to take 6 months of work to really get the ROI out of it. So we need to make sure it's worth it before we just start down that process.
I love it. I love that you have that approach with your partners, because that says a lot. And even if they, at this present time, aren't the right fit for Funnel, because you've handled them in that way, that they'll be back. I'm sure they'll be back.
No, you're right. And I think, if you were to look at our sales pipeline, most of our new deals are lost deals from, a couple years ago, where either they weren't ready for us or we advised them otherwise. And I feel comfortable sharing the story. He'd let me tell it, but we're very fortunate to be rolling out a lot of properties with Greystar. They've talked publicly about that. And the call, the highlight of my career was their COO called me and he said, "Hey, I heard you said no to a pilot with us." And I said, I was kind of scared, like, oh no, he's gonna be mad. And he said, "That is awesome." He said, "Nobody tells us no for a pilot." And he said, "I want to know why. Tell me why. Why did you say no?" And I think you're right. It earns a lot of respect with your partners when you say, "We're not a good fit right now. Keep doing what you're doing." And you'll get another chance at it. This is a relationship industry. They'll respect you and you'll get another chance.
Hi, folks. I wanted to take a quick 30-second break so that I could say, I hope you're enjoying today's episode, which couldn't be brought to you without being superpowered by Sales Mail. I mean, really, we couldn't produce this content without them. Sales Mail is the easiest and best tool for sending personalized video via email, text, and CRM. So, if you really are enjoying today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you would visit salesmail.com so you can check out how our solutions might impact your business communications. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn as well. Okay, that's enough. Now back to the conversation. Yeah, you've made a couple of really good, insightful mentions. You talk about the fact that it's relationship business. You talk about the fact that you're helping customers uncover those pain points that they can't solve with their current solution. If you've got something that does solve it, you offer it. If you don't, you let them know. I think those are some good tidbits for folks on the supplier partner side to hear. You guys have really taken an intentional path towards building the relationships that you have, and that's been a real secret, I think, to your success in winning some of these really big partnerships that you've won, because you are taking that really intentional, customer-centered approach to, pitching your solution. And if you're not right, you don't do it, which I think is awesome. And I give you kudos for that. I do think there's a lot of value in, sitting back and having a tailored, intentional approach to each customer, knowing as much as you can about them before you get on the phone with them or before you get in a meeting with them, so that you can talk their language and you understand their current solutions and how yours is different. It's an interesting journey to watch,
Well, thank you, Steve. It means a lot. Yeah, it really does. As I grew up as a salesperson in the industry. And so, you're right. Intentional is the right word. We've always had a smaller sales organization than our peers. And that's, as a sales guy, maybe that's a little unique. We actually, I can see in my head right now, we hired our first SDR ever because we don't want to be the company that is just overwhelming people. That's a short mindset idea. And this is an industry where referenceability is what matters, right? And your character matters. And I think I've got in my office, Steve, this funny little cap from a yogurt. And it says on the back, it's hard to beat someone who never quits. And I don't think Funnel's ever been the hottest startup. There's always been a knock or somebody else. But, you look ahead a few years and you just think, hey, that company kept at it. They've got referenceable customers. The leadership team is still in place. So I appreciate that. Being intentional, I think in an industry like this really matters.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the leasing consultant at the Cortland deal in Atlanta or where it was Vegas that you visited her. Seeing that some of these functionalities now that Funnel's able to sort of either automate or centralize and taking some of that administrative burden off of the site team, what are you seeing from your perspective that's improving the resident experience or the prospect experience from those folks who partnered with you? And is there some confetti to be thrown in terms of how well the customer experience is improving now that a tool like Funnel is part of their equation?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I think I'll start out with kind of a big statement, which is we have planted our flag in the ground at Funnel. And as much as we're investing massively in AI, right? We did a big acquisition, we announced a big partnership. We do not believe this is an industry where we're going to zero humans. I don't think consumers want that. And I just don't think it's the right way to go about it. And having said that, to your question, we've got partners that closed their leasing offices during the pandemic and haven't reopened them. Now, they still have large teams, they have large staff, and they're performing very well. But it's just a different approach, right? So they've got centralized teams and they've layered in AI. But I don't think anytime in the near future, this is an industry that's going to be autonomous leasing. Now, where the confetti should be thrown and where we think there's huge opportunity is first and foremost, give the consumer great digital experiences where they want them, right? Where they're able to. So we all know there's cool bots out there. Funnel sells one that can help you book a tour. Well, the data says 80% of consumers don't want to talk to a bot to book a tour. They want a really good self-service button, right? It's just like if I'm going to book a flight to, Atlanta today, or I'm going to book a barber, I don't really want to chat with somebody about that. I want to see my options. I want to click the buttons, right? That's the preferred method. It's the same thing with applications, with renewals. Yeah. AI is more the edge case for that person that didn't quite get their question answered about the pet policy. AI is great for that. And right now we are in this overhyped bubble in which people think chatbots are going to be everything. They're a part of the solution, but self-service is a huge part that we're ignoring. And if we just think about our own lives as consumers, most things I don't want to talk to a chatbot about, I want to self-serve. The next piece is in that kind of where you throw confetti, the ability to have specialized teams. We touched on it a few times, but is infinite in the arrangements that you could make as an operator. So we've got a partner in Canada named QuadReal. QuadReal decided that they were going to leave on-site resident ambassadors. They wanted the people that were on site to be great at renewals, and they handle tours, but they're not salespeople. Because they can say, hey, let me tell you about this unit. I know your neighbor. I know it's not a unit. They say suite, right, in Canada, but they know the property intimately. Often they live there, right? So they made that decision. I mentioned another public REIT, Essex, no leasing office, closed doors, all digital, all self-guided tours, UDR, similar approach. And then we've got others like Cortland, who I mentioned, that are all about a high touch, very high quality sales process. But that in-office leasing associate has a team of people behind them. I mean, teams, right? They've got applications teams, renewals teams, maintenance teams. And when a call comes in, I don't have to worry about it. I am on site. That call is going to somebody off site who's going to make sure that maintenance is taken care of. So there's a lot of confetti to be thrown. But candidly, I think the fun part is if I'm an operator today versus an operator 5 years ago, to your point at OpTech, like it's probably overwhelming, the optionality, but it's also exciting if you got an Archstone DNA and you're like, ooh, what could I do here? It's infinite, the number of arrangements you could set up.
That Archstone DNA really speaks loudly, especially with all the conversations that I have with folks in this, kind of arena. Thinking about some of the partners that you've worked with, how can an operator's corporate support team and the folks that are kind of on the operator side be a good partner for you? What are some recommendations you can make for folks listening that are at these organizations looking to make some changes? How can they be the best possible partner for an organization like Funnel and make these changes happen easier, better, faster?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit obvious, but it really matters because we've seen it work and we've seen it not work. You have to start with why. And the best example of that, we had a whole keynote about this at our conference with Tom Sloan. There's Archstone DNA and there's also Camden DNA. Interestingly, Archstone came up with LRO, right? And Camden came up with YieldStar. But Tom Sloan was an operational leader at Camden. He's now the president at Windsor, based out of Boston. He's out of Atlanta. But he and his team, and he would say it's all about his team, gave this amazing keynote speech at our forum about their change management. They were very humble about the things they did well and the things they didn't do well. But what they nailed, and this shows up, Steve, in site level data. Like we track all of our end users. We ask them all the time, hey, do you like Funnel? Is it helping you? And it's so wild because it's the same tool, right? Like Funnel, there's not like 10 versions of Funnel. There's one version. You can configure it how you want, like we said. But at the end of the day, it's one piece of software. It's wild, Steve, to see how different the NPS or the Net Promoter Score data is from one operator to the next. And like the biggest thing, so GID is way up here. JID's the asset manager, Windsor's the property management company.
Yeah.
They're way up here. And the reason they're way up here is they have a great culture, but they started with why. They explained to everybody from day one, you're not just getting a new piece of software, you're getting a new operating model. And it's going to result in what they called bigger, better jobs, right? So today you're, an assistant leasing manager. In the future, you might be a regional sales leader, right? Mm-hmm. And here's what the compensation looks like, right? And here's what the responsibilities look like. So they created these career paths associated with the change. And of course, versus you just throw a new piece of software at somebody and you say, do you like it? Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. Those folks were so much more bought in. And then therefore the results were phenomenal, right? They've continued to win these kind of like Kingsley Awards and these reputation awards for their ability to service their customers. So that's one very notable example of our partners who focus on the why of the technology, and in particular for Funnel, the why of the business model transformation. Mm-hmm. They see a much better outcome. And I think right now there's a huge risk. You mentioned it, with AI being everywhere. If I'm a leasing associate or a support associate and I see, hey, you got to use this new AI tool, and you look at it, you're like, it's pretty clear you're just trying to get rid of me. People are not going to buy into that, right? They're not going to be excited to work with that tool. And so that's why I'm sitting here in Funnel's office and I see we've got these cutouts of superheroes. So our why with AI is to make leasing associates and property management associates superheroes. It's not to replace them. It's to make them better, more powerful. We want to eliminate so many job postings. There's way too many job postings in our industry, right? We have turnover constantly. Yeah. But the amazing associates in multifamily, we want to help create the next Steve Wunch, right? Somebody who spent a whole career in this industry and grew up, and the AI helped them move along faster. But yeah, start with why would be my biggest obvious advice.
Yeah. And I love that it's designed to help them. And I think that that's a perspective shift that a lot of onsite folks need to really grab onto and hold on to, because it's not designed to replace you. To your point, it's designed to make you better. I think of I'm going to age myself, but I think of the startup to the $6 million man, we're going to make him stronger, faster. It's like they didn't replace him. They just enhanced him, and that's what this is all designed to do. And, that's what sales mail is kind of about too, is to bring that human element into this technologically driven process. And, remembering that there's a resident on the other end of all this talk that we're doing, every piece of the puzzle. It's all going to end up with some human making a decision about home, which is a very emotional, very personal decision to make. And you can't just set it and forget it. And I think that that's a really good warning and a good wake up call for folks who might be a little fearful around some of the talk of centralization and role specialization. It's not designed to replace you, because I don't think there will ever come a time when it will replace you, because people need that human contact. People are desperate for it. I mean, look at the mental health state of the union. People are desperate for connection. They're desperate for, Gen Z wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And it's not a robot. It's another person. It's a running group. It's a book club. It's, those human elements that really make life valuable and rich. So I love to hear your perspective on that. And speaking of AI and all that whole business, let's talk a little bit about Phoenix, because number one, I don't know that much about it, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys are doing. So give us a little bit of what's going on in terms of Phoenix.
Yeah. So Steve, I want to echo, I completely agree with everything you said. I think that you're right that property management associates, professionals should embrace technology, learn to use it, right? Just like I encourage my kids to play with ChatGPT and like get familiar with it. It's how you're going to operate in the future. But I will say, I think there are a lot of folks that are misguided that do think it's going to replace humans. And we're not making that bet. Even though we're spending millions of dollars on AI and technology, and I'm flying tomorrow to meet with the leading AI company in the world, it's not going to replace humans, just like the robots in a car factory didn't, right? The jobs are going to shift. The jobs are going to require different skill sets, but you need to embrace it and leverage it. But in particular, to your point, I love this. They're homes at the end of the day, right? These are humans deciding where they want to live, and they want the assurance of that sense of community. And I think there's a huge, this is a little off topic, but I had somebody recently who was a small third-party manager in the Northwest telling me that they think that, they can take their whole business and make it, driven by AI. And I said, I love the enthusiasm. I don't know why the asset manager needs you. if what you're imagining is true, why wouldn't they just buy it? What are they paying a property management company for? Right. Right. I think it's the service, right? It's the ability to connect, and somebody could go buy and implement funnel on their own. But as you said earlier, they want to know, they want to look me in the eye and trust that I'm going to be here. They want to meet with our team and learn from our collective experience, right? Yeah. Like all of those human engagements matter in giant software companies and in individual leasing. So to the question about Phoenix, we have, to your earlier question, actually, always known that implementing funnel as a CRM was a pretty big lift, right? And we call it the new operating model, but centralization is just one component of that, and the CRM is one component of it. One of the things that we recognized was, the pathway onto the new operating model was really narrow, and we wanted to open it up a bit more. And so, we were approached about this opportunity to acquire a company called Leasing that was very early in the AI genesis. They were one of the first companies to have a chatbot, in particular a voice solution. And so our kind of success in helping customers with their contact centers, our success in helping folks with AI gave us the belief that, by acquiring those assets, and I'll talk about our partnership with Sierra in a moment, but we wanted to have an easier on-ramp to the new operating model. So historically, if you were going to buy funnel, you had to buy the whole enchilada. Now we've got tools like an AI Insights product that tells you what's happening on your calls, where AI is a little more accessible. It's a little more digestible than having to buy the whole thing. So that's what Phoenix is about. Yes, funnel is still a holistic solution. It can help you centralize. But if you just want to start with, hey, what are my leasing associates talking about, right? Where are we missing calls? Those sort of products are now going to be more easily accessible. So that's one part of it. And then the second part that we're really excited about, I mentioned I'm flying to San Francisco tomorrow, is we were very fortunate to create a partnership with a company called Sierra. And most people in multifamily wouldn't be familiar with this, but I bet everybody knows what OpenAI is, right? ChatGPT. Well, the chairman of OpenAI, he used to be the Salesforce CEO. He left the CEO of Salesforce position. He's still the chairman of OpenAI, but he started this chatbot company called Sierra. And his goal was to have the world's greatest conversational AI be embedded in other customer service experiences. And so we were fortunate to create a partnership with them where we're the exclusive multifamily offerer of this solution. And, if we were to kind of poll the audience, do you think the world's greatest AI is going to be born in multifamily or in Silicon Valley? I think everyone would say, well, Silicon Valley. But they wanted to partner with Funnel because they didn't want to do that last mile of, well, how does it integrate with apartments.com, right? And how is it going to, integrate with Blue Moon for applications? Like they want Funnel to do all that stuff, right? And so Funnel does all of the multifamily stuff. It works directly with the leasing associates, but we get to take advantage of, as an anecdotal example, their work to do, Mandarin AI for booking a tour. Right. And like day one, we went live with them and they were able to book a tour in Mandarin. Their voice product that we're now rolling out genuinely sounds like you're speaking to a human. Like I've seen a lot of voice demos over the years, and this is brand new. We haven't rolled it out to everybody, but it is unbelievable, Steve, the natural discourse you can have with it. And so while not everybody wants an AI voice product, I'm one of those who screams, representative on the call. For our partners who want that, we're going to make sure they have the best possible tool. So rather than our engineers spending 3 years building that, we just fast track to the front of the line. So we're going to have the best in class AI powering the best in class CRM and multifamily. And Phoenix is going to be the way that consumers use that, right? So that is Funnel's AI brand is Phoenix.
That's crazy. And I'm sure it does multiple languages besides Mandarin, English, Spanish.
That's right. Yeah. And again, we could spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to rebuild those things, or we could just partner with a company that spends all day, every day. I mean, the cool thing, like they showed us last week was cough technology. That is legitimate, like it sounds. So when you're talking with a human, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, right? But like if you're playing with an AI tool or like Siri or Alexa in your house and you're talking and someone coughs, it can't hear you, right? Or there's background noise. So if I'm talking to the AI agent and I cough, it knows that I'm not interrupting it. It doesn't stop. Like it's smart enough to keep talking. So these are just small examples of things that there's no reason for us to be developing, right? If there's kind of best in class technology already doing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let me ask you this then, and we'll kind of wind things down here, but where does the handoff happen then? So this, it sounds like you've got some things coming to market that are going to really revolutionize, not only the leasing experience, but the customer experience in general. But where does the handoff happen? Because, that human piece, I remember when I was moving to Richmond, I was conversing with someone named Scout at one of the properties that I was considering. And it was great up to a point, and then Scout stopped responding because evidently I outgrew their knowledge base or the questions that I was asking weren't part of its, normal routine. And so then when I got to the property, I was like, hey, I'd like to meet Scout. And they were like, well, Scout's not real. So where does that handoff happen, and how do you make it smooth and an easy transition for a customer to not feel like they've, been duped?
Yeah. So that is another example of the operator really gets to make that decision. The vast majority of funnel users early on were really optimizing for the use case you described, which is they wanted a seamless handoff. They wanted to make sure that when the consumer got frustrated or the knowledge base, was no longer sufficient, that it was a quick, seamless handoff and not kind of a drop off, right?
Yeah.
And so we've always optimized for that. We are seeing now certain operators, and again, this is a choice, who are just looking to get as many conversations handled by AI as possible. And that's one of the reasons that we are leaning into this Sierra partnership of, we all know that contact centers can be really challenging to keep staffed, right? There's a lot of pros and cons to them. AI is pretty good at the contact center use case. And so our voice solution with Sierra can frankly eliminate a lot of the use cases you need for a contact center. But going back to our earlier point, I think if I were an operator today, and this is dangerous, but if I put on my operator hat and you say, how are you going to use this tool? I would make sure that when the human gives any indication, whether that's, through a text or a voice, that they're looking for that human interaction, that I would have the highest quality, fastest human interaction possible. Because we all know, and we all do the secret shops. If I go right now, inquire at 3 communities here in Tampa, Florida, I'm going to get 3 inquiries would get 6 to 10 automated emails back, 1 random call 2 days from now, right? It's a bad customer service experience, Steve.
Yeah.
And so the partners that can really engage with that consumer immediately, they're going to outperform. And so while I think it's great that a lot of folks are focused on AI, and again, we've got some really cool tools and it's the fastest growing part of our business, the opportunity to differentiate is to engage with the human at the right place at the right time with the right info, right? Because you don't want to explain yourself again, to your point. If I've already told Scout I want a 2-bedroom and it needs to be pet friendly, I don't want to re-explain that. And that's the beauty of a renter-centric CRM, is that it has all that knowledge. Oh, Steve, I saw you were looking at community A. Thanks for coming to community B. I assume that your, Labradoodle is going to be coming with you. So all of that knowledge and the human interaction is what makes differentiation.
And so many opportunities to insert humanity into that, that workflow. And I just think, again, that word intention comes to mind for those operators listening that may be going through these changes or considering these changes. Don't forget to, as part of your plan, to make sure you've got those moments determined where that human interaction or where a sales mail might be popped into a autoresponder versus just sending out a text message. I think there's a lot of opportunity to enhance the experience, offload the work from the site team so that they can focus on the things that matter in person. But again, that renter-centered approach that you guys have taken has really been a success. And it's been your mantra from the start. I remember when you first uttered those words, I was like, oh, that's going to be good.
Well, thank you, Steve. We appreciate this opportunity and super grateful for folks like yourself that have kind of watched us along the way. But I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of ways that you can engage with your consumer, but standing out personally, you sent me through sales mail a reminder video last week leading up to one of our calls, and I watched it. It made me feel seen. It made me feel important, right? Oh, Steve's excited for my call with them, right? So those little opportunities to show you care and show you're engaged make all the difference.
Well, thanks for joining us. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour because there's a lot of fun stuff happening in your world, but we will release the public to their daily duties and thank them for tuning in to this episode of the Multifamily Mind. Again, brought to you by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, or CRM. This has been Steve Wunch and Tyler Christiansen. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Multifamily Mind podcast, brought to you by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, and CRM. To learn more, go to salesmail.com. And remember, always be audacious. Until next time, I'm Steve Wunch. Have a great week.